welcome back to another edition of What's the Message. We are so excited to be back with you, and I'm telling you, today's episode is epic. As you can see, I got my Black Panther outfit on because I'm feeling radical this morning, okay? Everything that I absolutely love, social justice and just caring and advocating for the vulnerable is really what we are going to get into today, specifically around basically not just mass incarceration, but the mass detention of Black boys and Black girls. And so I just want to get you ready, sit down, put your seatbelt on, because we have an amazing guest that is really going to help walk us through how to do this thing and just the information, what's going on and everything. And so, as you know, I am your host, Claudia Allen. And of course, I am joined with my friend, my boss, my commander-in-chief, the lady in charge, the one I take my orders from, Carmela Monk Crawford. And as you all know, we try every single week to bring you the hope in the headlines. And so we are trying to not just deal with whatever is trending, but we also want to bring you some level of inspiration and some level of hope concerning that. All right. And so we have a very special guest that is going to help us do that. Her name is Valerie Slater, and she leads the Rise for Youth Coalition. She is actually the executive director of this organization, and she advocates for the rights of youth, their families, and their communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Previously, Valerie worked as a juvenile justice attorney with the Legal Aid Justice Center and coordinated RISE efforts from the Just Children program of the Legal Aid Justice Center. Valerie also worked to protect the rights of children with disabilities in community, residential, and juvenile justice facilities throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Valerie earned her JD from the University of Richmond and her BA from Colorado State. Valerie brings to her work an unwavering commitment to strengthening youth and communities to lead efforts and realize their visions for change. I'm telling you, I talked to this woman yesterday, and her bio is in no way a valid representation of her training, her expertise, and probably most importantly, the impact that she has made in criminal justice reform, in juvenile justice reform, and in the impact that she has made on these young people's lives. So I'm excited for you to hear from her and for us to just kind of learn together, because I know that so many of us do not really know what is happening to our young people in these facilities, and we don't really have a true understanding of how the criminal justice system is kind of structured to work against them. And it's not actively working for their benefit, for them to truly be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And so that's just really what we are going to get into today. And I am super, super excited about it. We want you to share this thing everywhere. Share it, like it. And right before we get started, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have been liking and following our content. We are up to 13,000 followers now. That is mind-blowing. And so it is just super, just another confirmation that you are being blessed by, enlightened by, inspired by what it is that we are sharing right here on social media. So just continue to share this thing. If you're being blessed by it, if you're growing by it, if you love it, make sure that you like it, make sure that you share it so that somebody else can be blessed. All right, Carmela, get us into this thing, man. What have you read? What are you finding? What are you seeing? Help us to understand this situation.
Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you and welcome, Valerie. Thank you, Claudia. Sitting here right now, my blood, how sometimes your blood boils. Sometimes your blood is stirred within you because this is something that strikes at the heart of your passion. And it's not just our people but the vulnerable of our people. And as you know, Claudia, I'm just looking at you in your Black Panther outfit. As you know, this is my passion, but not as much as Valerie's passion. Valerie's out there on the front lines. We, you know where I want to go with this, in addition to the stories, and I'm going to bring in some of those stories right now, but it makes me think of two interviews that we had. One with Michelle Alexander. We talked to Michelle Alexander a few years ago now. And I asked Michelle Alexander, and she's so smart. Everybody knows her as the renowned professor from the Ohio State University School of Law and the author of The New Jim Crow. And I said to Michelle Alexander, I says, what are we going to do? How are we going to battle this massive system that is crushing our people disproportionately, especially our children disproportionately? What are we going to do? Especially because we have all been trained, even as Black people, that people who are incarcerated deserve to be there. People who are incarcerated get what they deserve. And therefore, if you are caught out there, that's on you. Right? And so nobody is coming to get you, and we feel as though that is okay somehow. And so I remember Michelle Alexander told me, she says, she told us that message. And she said, I view that mass incarceration of poor people and people of color as a moral crisis, a spiritual crisis facing our nation, rather than primarily a political, social, and economic battle. She believes that there is also a spiritual component to her fight that requires her to accept people no matter what they've done, even violent offenders. She said, it is so hard to acknowledge and to see the spirit and the divinity that lies within people who have done terrible things. But for me, she said, if we are holding anyone outside of our circle of care or concern, they were not being true to our faith, or at least I'm not being true to my own faith. That's what she told me. She brought it straight in there to me. And here's the other thing. We went and we talked to Brian Stevenson a few years ago, who is, come on, Valerie, I see you smiling, because is he not our man? Because Brian
he is indeed.
He is in the fight. Not only is he in the fight, he is passionate, and he's a Christian man whose only his faith allows him to walk into these facilities and see, just like Jesus said, when you visited me, you did it to the least of these, you did it unto me. He sees that opportunity when he walks into these facilities, and he's doing everything he can, just like the word said, to snatch this brand out of the fire that was prepared for them. And I love Brian Stevenson, who in his book, when we went and talked to him, he was so wonderful. He sat there and he talked to us, and he was telling us about his work. But he also said, he said he was describing to us what it was like to walk into the prison on the day that there was a scheduled execution. And you may have seen this in the movie Just Mercy, right? And so the prisoner's last request was that he have the old rugged cross play. And so you've got the juxtaposition of the beautiful hymn, the cross and the grace and the forgiveness of Jesus, and they're firing up the electric chair on the other hand. And Brian Stevenson says it's just weird to hear the old rugged cross. He said, now this day, everything that man wanted, they supplied for him. His favorite meal, asking him about what he wants, and tending to his needs, being kind and gentle and tender. And he said, while he's listening to this hymn while sitting across the table from this condemned man, he says, I couldn't help but think, where were you, these people, when this guy was 3 years old and his mom died? Where were you when you were 6 years old and you were being abused? Where were they when you were 9 and you were being sexually assaulted? Where were they when you were 13 and you were experimenting with drugs? But here now today, they're there for him. I'm sorry, it's a lot of lead in, but Valerie, our question for you today is, where are our people first? Talk to me. How did you get into this? You, among other people, you decided to step in the fight. Talk to us about that.
You know, I tell you what, I just want to share that I had the opportunity to meet with Brian Stevenson also a couple of years back. He came here to Virginia. One of our partners, Performing Statistics, they were rolling out a national exhibit, and our young people were there, and we had carved out, he had been so generous to carve out some time to meet with our young people, to talk with them, and to, you know, share his journey. And then when he gave a talk later talking about his book, you know, made way for front row seating for our young people. And many of the young people that we work with in RISE, they've had their own experiences with the justice system. And so it resonates so in my heart that, you know, that notion of getting proximate with the people that Brian Stevenson lifted up, and that he's willing to do that, and that he has done that. I have seen firsthand him doing exactly that. And we've also had an opportunity to take some of the young people that we work with to Alabama to see the museum there and the monument there. And so it's so striking and so powerful. And now your question was, what got me into this work? And, you know, if I were to travel back into my own childhood, and I could share with you that I had my own bout with homelessness. I had my own bout with, you know, doing the things that a homeless child would do to survive, you know, walking down the grocery store aisles and opening up things and eating them in the store, hoping that that would keep me from catching a shoplifting charge. Mercy. You know, I've had my own bout with being picked up and, you know, and spending nights behind bars myself and being so afraid, and, you know, and finally, you know, finding my way up and out, but, you know, finding my way into a relationship that was so damaging to me as an individual, both psychologically and unfortunately physically. And when I finally, you know, found myself coming out of that, seeking God and asking him, where do I go from here, Lord? Surely this is not where you see my life, and this is not what you have purposed for me. Where is my purpose, God? And hearing my Lord say to me, I have anointed and appointed you, Valerie, to snatch my young people out of the hands of the criminal justice system and to place them into my just hands. Wow. And I tell you what, I held on to that. I held on to that when I was trying to figure out, how do I get myself and my small children out of this abusive space? And then when we finally did get into our own space, how do I provide and make sure that me and my babies are safe? And all the way through school, you know, I started at community college in Washington State, where I'm from. And then I moved to Colorado to do undergrad, and then brought my daughters with me here to Virginia for law school. And there was a 3-month span of time after I graduated from law school, and, you know, someone had offered me a job. And then after a background check, excuse me, because I just get so emotional.
No, yeah, you're
when
good,
I think about
man.
my history.
Wow.
When someone told me, with your background, you will never sit for the bar exam. Can I tell you how devastated and crushed that made me feel in that moment? But I held on to what God told me. He told me a thing and sent me on a journey, and the enemy wasn't going to be able to take that from me. Yes. So after 3 months of a struggle, of trying to, you know, figure it out, and how do I make this right? Yeah. You know, and then surrendering to, you know, Lord, even if this goes completely away, I've got you. And I trust that whatever you said to me, you will bring it to pass. And then I got a call to begin work at the to be interviewed at the Disability Law Center of Virginia. And so I became a children's right advocate there. And it was, it was 2 years in, because I didn't have the money to take the bar. And so it was 2 years in before I was able to sit for the bar. And, you know, you see ESQ behind my name. You see Esquire behind my name.
I see that.
And
yeah.
so we serve a God that will take the enemy's best and crush it and show the enemy that your absolute best. It does not even weigh. It does not even, it can't even be in the same room as my grace. It can't even hold the same space as my ability to take absolutely nothing and make something of it. And so I am a product of God's grace. I am a product of God's word coming to pass. I am a product of faith. And so I came to this work with all that I am and believing God that I had nothing but him. And so now this space that I hold, you know, I don't take lightly this space. I recognize that, but for the grace of God, I could not hold it. And so I also realize that I have got to be a good steward of this that God has given me. And so I do it with all of my might. I do it with all of my strength. And I do it as if my life depends on it, because each one of those children, my life depends on helping them.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
Man, praise
glory
God.
God.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing just the breadth of that. That was beautiful. Wow. Man.
I know. It is beautiful to hear how God has brought you in, not just how he has brought you, but the sweet realization that what the enemy meant for harm and to hold you back, God could turn around, not just turn around for you, but to, through you, bless and help other people.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your organization. What is it that your organization does?
Yeah, so, you know, I realized that I stopped at Disability Law Center and I was there for 4 years, but then I transitioned to the Legal Aid Justice Center as the coordinator of Rise for Youth. Rise for Youth was once upon a time a project of the Legal Aid Justice Center. Rise stands for Reinvest in Supportive Environments. And so literally that's what we do, right? We work to make sure that every system, every space that impacts a young person's life, that it is positive, that it is uplifting, and that it is creating a pathway to success for youth. You know, after being with the project for 2 years at Legal Aid Justice Center, we realized we had outgrown that space. And so I was able to, with the grace of God, take the project independent. So now we're fiscally sponsored, but we are a standalone organization now. So I've transitioned from being the coordinator to the executive director. And we do so much, right? We are advocating on the policy level. We have introduced legislation that would dismantle completely the prison system, the juvenile prison system model as it exists. We introduced that this legislative session in the General Assembly here in Virginia. It moved through both substantive committees. On the Senate side, it moved through the Rehabilitation and Social Service Committee with a unanimous vote. And then it moved through Public Safety, and it was a closer vote, but nevertheless, those were the two substantive committees, and it made it into then the money committees, which is where it stalled. And, you know, the department put forward a fiscal impact statement that basically made it seem untenable. But the good thing about it being referred to study is we're now going to be able to lay out just how positive the impact will be and how positive the investment, the fiscal investment on the front end will yield such a magnificent result in the long run that it is worth the investment, but that investment is not as great as was first supposed in that initial fiscal impact statement. So we're excited about where it is now. Yeah. We work with young people. We have a Youth for Rise. So our young people, they inform everything that we do. When we are in strategic planning, we're in strategic planning with young people to lay out exactly what the state of juvenile justice is, what are all of the factors and components that are impacting young lives. And then they give us recommendations, and we build a strategic plan that is centered around their voices, their desires, and their ability to be a part of the advocacy. Our young people, we do a retreat with them every year, the MLK weekend. We take them away, and we are usually shut up in one of the hostels here in Virginia. And it's a weekend of learning what it means to be an advocate. It's a weekend of learning how to talk to legislators, how to put forward our pieces of legislation that we are asking these legislators to vote, and how to tell your story in a way that will move a legislator. And so our young folks, they have the opportunity to build with young folks from other groups. We usually invite in, we always invite in, and we have other organizations, young folks come and they're a part of this. And then it culminates in a day of action, MLK Day. We go and we visit with legislators. They have the opportunity to use those skills that they have learned. And we have seen our young people hold their own in the face of basically hostile legislators who are so anti what they have come to say that they, push back in very negative ways. But, we have seen young people do amazing things. And that's not even all of it, right? We, when young folks are coming out of prison and detention centers, we're supporting them. We are supporting families, making sure that they have their basic needs met, and then creating pathways to education and employment.
Tell me, awesome. Valerie, but I think it's so interesting. I'm listening to you say about training these young people to advocate for themselves and advocate for the causes around which you are rallying. One thing that was always very persuasive for me when in talking to people is to let them know that the number one predictor of a child coming back, reoffending, and going back into the system is the fact that they were there in the first place. The fact it's not your family, it's not the fact that you had a gun, it's not your drugs, it's the fact that you were in there in the first place, because so many people still think, even our own people still think, you're acting up, you can go over there and we're going to put you in juvie, you're going to learn a lesson, and then you're going to straighten up. Right. But that's not the case. Is that right?
That's true. That's exactly right. You see, once you have taken away the mystery, once you break that seal, it's always easier to go back. And so it is an unfortunate cycle that, has been fed to our community in particular. If the child is acting up, you send them into the system. That's not the case in other communities, is it?
Absolutely.
When we think about, let's just talk about Johnny and Jamal. Right? Johnny, we don't want to ruin his bright future. Jamal, we're going to teach him a lesson. We have different narratives depending on, many factors. And, one of the biggest factors, one of the main factors is the color of your skin, the community that you come from, your socioeconomic background. Those three pieces, they really do define to some degree exactly how you are going to move forward. But you're right. When you send children into detention, you take away the fear of, oh my gosh, I don't want to be locked up. All of a sudden, you've normalized it for them. You have created, and it's quite unfortunate, but I know that there are some young folks that because their situations are so dire, being locked up almost sounds better. I'll have 3 meals. I'll have a place to sleep. I won't be running and living in fear of whether or not I'll even be able to take a shower. So, yeah.
Well, could you kind of,
go ahead, Claudia.
Could you get maybe, what is the difference between, is there a difference between juvenile detention centers and adult prisons or adult jails?
So, first, let's talk about the difference between a detention center and a correctional center for juveniles. So detention is where young folks are held pre-trial if a detention order is issued on them. If they are adjudicated delinquent and they have a sentence that is a year or less, they are more likely to stay in a detention center, or it would be considered a community placement program in Virginia, but it would be housed within a detention center or some other alternative. Whereas a correctional center, it's the prison.
Right.
And in Virginia, the remaining correctional center can hold 272 young people.
Wow.
And so, right. And when you go in, you know, I've had clients in Bon Air, and, you know, you go in, of course, into that first locked space, and then you're buzzed into that second locked space, and then you're buzzed into the actual facility itself. And of course, they've got the classrooms and the holding cells and those kinds of things. But when you go into the pod, you know, it's an open space, and then it's surrounded by cells. And so some of them are 2-person cells, some of them are 1-person cells, but it's built just like an adult prison. So when you see the pictures of the prison that's got the big open space and then the cells around it, it's like that.
Wow.
That's exactly what it looks like. It's not as huge because the pods are for between 14 to 18 young people, something to that effect, you know. And there are 14 pods total within Bon Air.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it looks just like an adult prison.
And it feels like an adult prison when you walk into it. It feels very much.
That's right.
The cut off on the outside, the guards and everything like that, right?
That's right. And the barbed wire, you know, the large fence, all of that. You got it all.
Do you ever walk into the situation and tell us about maybe, you know, your most vulnerable client when you walk into there and you see this little kid there? Talk to us about that. What does that look like?
So I can remember going to visit one of my clients, and when I arrived, they said, "Oh, it'll be a little bit. We're experiencing some difficulties." And so I sat, and I guess it had been 20 minutes. And they said, "Well, you know, we're not sure you're going to be able to see him today. We can't get him to calm down. He's in shackles." And I was like, "Wait, I'm not leaving. I am going to sit and I'm going to wait to see my client." And when I finally did get to see him, he was, you know, he had the cuffs on that were connected to the chain around his waist, with the chains down to his ankles and shackled there as well. And he was visibly shaken. You know, he is a young man. And see, I was in visiting him because he had mental health diagnoses. And so here's this young man who has been through traumas in his life, is now experiencing the trauma of being locked up, and has now experienced this traumatic experience of, you know, being handled by guards and, you know, and being shackled. And they attempted to tell me that I was not going to see him at least 3 times. And I just refused to leave. I said, "I'm not leaving without seeing my client." And, you know, and then having the guard standing in this space far away, but nevertheless that he was in this space made it, you know, very difficult for this young man to want to speak to me. And so we didn't accomplish all that was intended for the visit, but I was glad to be able to lay eyes on him and see that, you know, and let him also know that I wasn't going to leave. They weren't going to be able to give me any length of time that I was not going to sit and wait. You know, and then, you know, to have young people also that I had to go and visit while they were in what's called, you know, the behavioral management unit. And, you know, to talk to one of my clients literally through his cell wall, you know, because they were unwilling to let him out. And, you know, to hear some of the some of the conditions that, you know, he was living in and what he was experiencing. So, and now to know that young people, you know, because of the coronavirus are in lockdown for 23 hours a day, you know, that's solitary confinement, you know, so yeah.
So yeah, could you talk about that just a little bit, you know,
that's good.
Because, you know, solitary confinement as anybody just kind of with just a basic understanding is a borderline a form of psychological torture almost. And so in essence, what you're saying is that many of these correctional facilities, in an attempt to quarantine these young people, are actually placing them in solitary confinement.
Right. Bon Air Juvenile Correctional Center, that young people there are being locked down for 23 hours a day. It is psychological torture. One of the young men, he wrote to his mother, and she shared the letter with me. And first line of this young man's letter was, "I'll be missed if I'm successful." And then he began to apologize. And so when you hear that line, wow, that immediately made me, I had to stop and I had to pray for this young man, because, if I'll be missed if I'm successful, we know exactly what that sounds like, right? We know exactly what this young man was alluding to. And, this was a young man who also has mental health issues and has literally been in a mental health facility. So, for him to be locked up for 23 hours a day, to not receive the therapies that, he was a part of and that were making progress to help this young man find his way back, it is psychological torture. And it cannot be so. We must not. The call that we put out, the call that Rise for Youth put out saying, call the governor, text him, email him, put on social media that we must free as many young people as possible. The hashtags, Justice for Youth is the antidote, because we have got to do right by these young people. We've got to work diligently. We must partner with every partner who is able to help to get as many young people out of Bon Air as possible, because we cannot use solitary confinement as an effective means of quarantine. We just cannot.
Right. How old are many of the youth in Bon Air, and or really what I'm wondering is how young are some of the youth in Bon Air, and then what age are you when you age out of, let's say, a juvenile correctional facility and then have to be potentially transferred to an adult prison?
So a young person in Bon Air could be as young as 11 years old and as old as 20. Because if you have what would be called a blended sentence, meaning you've got some time that you owe to the Department of Juvenile Justice and you've got some time that you owe to the Department of Corrections. So at some point before your 21st birthday, you will have what's called a serious offender review. And at that serious offender review, they're looking to see whether or not you've satisfied your commitment to the court. A treatment plan is always put together for every young person that comes in. And have you satisfied that treatment plan? Are their services, enough that they would be able to support a young person in community? And if there are, then perhaps that young person would not transfer to DOC, but rather would be released and would have some time of parole and those kinds of things. But it's at age 20 that they technically age out, because at 21, they must transfer into the Department of Corrections. Yeah.
During this time,
the average age of young people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your statement.
Oh, I was just going to say the average age of young people right now at Bon Air is 17 at admission. And so, but we have unfortunately just recently, a young man has been charged with first-degree murder, and he's 12 years old. And so, yeah.
Wow.
It is such a dramatic thought to think already a system that's so broken and has such disparate impact just got that much worse. And so I understand your organization is seeking not only information, but release of people out of Bon Air. And I know many people are probably thinking, well, that's outrageous. What are we going to do with these kids, and where are they going to go, and how are we going to be safe? Talk to us about that. What are the ideas that could make this work as a win-win?
So first of all, the very idea that the department isn't partnering with community is just kind of outrageous. When you allow communities to take care of their own young folks, you have the greatest success of those young folks not ending up back. Because then all of a sudden they recognize I'm loved, I'm cared for by the very community that I'm from. My family is strengthened. My network of support is strengthened. And Rise for Youth, we've done a great deal of work to put together what's called community-based service coordination teams. And that is a network of providers who are able to put into place all of the supports necessary to support young people coming out of any situation. Right now, we are targeting the Department of Juvenile Justice and Bon Air because we want to help support getting as many young people out. So whenever a young person is about to be released, they have to put together what's called a reentry plan. And that reentry plan is going to be the comprehensive set of services that are necessary for this young folk to have the best opportunity at success. Well, we have taken all of the pieces of potential support and we have created networks of folks who provide those supports. And so all we need is a call saying, hey, we've got, this young person, they're coming out, they have this need, this need. We have a coordinator who would then reach out and set to the team, the set of team players and say, hey, who's available to do this? And then put that team together. That team gets on a call, coordinates all of the services, and they are ready then to have a call with the family to make sure that they have been comprehensive and they're putting it together and then activate and move forward to get that young person out. That's something that we're able to do because we have a strategic engagement director who is directly in community at all times. We have a network that goes far beyond the reach of the department because we are community. We aren't an administration, a bureaucratic machine attempting to impose itself and its ideas on community. We are community, and we are lifting up community partners so that they have an opportunity to enrich and wrap around and love on their own. So it isn't just an idea.
Yeah,
we have this in place.
This is good. I have a really great question that I think kind of ties in nicely to this from our audience. Young woman asked, what are the key factors needed to prevent the youth from entering the system kind of in the first place? And, you kind of mentioned mental health. Can you talk a little bit more about the role that plays? And she just wanted to say thank you so much for your work and how powerful it is. Just share with us a little bit of what can keep them out? What's causing them to also go in the first place?
Sure. So when we look at the young people who are inside, so let me just share just a few statistics, if I may.
Please.
So of all of the intakes that were, an intake is when a young person finds themselves in some sort of trouble and they are now at a court services unit. And that intake officer is determining whether or not they are going to proceed with this young person. So of all of the intakes, at least 90% of them are diversion eligible, meaning they have no further involvement with intake and they do not end up before a judge. But only 26% of those over 90% are diverted or handled in some other way.
Interesting.
Right. But then, so when we look at who ends up locked up, 69% of those locked up are Black, 10.7 Hispanic, and 24% are white. 24.8% are white.
Wow.
How many did you say were Black?
So,
69%.
And diversion eligible.
Many are. Here's the thing. Here's another fatal flaw, in my opinion. So let's say that a young person finds themselves before an intake officer for truancy. And that intake officer decides, I'm going to divert this. I'm not going to allow you. It's going to be an informal process. We're not going to put you before a judge. And then that child comes in a second time for a curfew violation. According to the law, you're only allowed one informal processing. So all of a sudden now you've created a situation for two, status offenses. A status offense, of course, is it's your age that makes it a crime. If you were over the age of 18, of course, you would never be, a curfew would not apply to you. Mm-hmm. Truancy, you know, if you're over the age of 18, would not apply to you. But those two very, and yes, we want kids to go to school. And yes, we want kids, you know, to be safe and in their homes. But really, because the child didn't go to school and because the child decided to be out later than whatever the curfew time is, all of a sudden they are court involved, you know. Yeah. And then let's look at the communities from which these young people are coming. You know, in Virginia, we can pinpoint directly where kids are coming from because approximately 40% of all of the kids that end up in a juvenile prison in Virginia come from the Hampton Roads area. And then we can drill down further. They're coming from Norfolk. They're coming from Virginia Beach, Newport News, and Hampton. So we know exactly where these kids are coming from. And then when we drill down even further, we can even take you to the public housing communities from which these young folks are coming from those localities. So we're looking at Black children who are from communities that are struggling socioeconomically. And then when we look at their school systems, those school systems are also, they're also struggling. Yeah. And these are young folks with social networks that are not as robust and as sound and as positive as they potentially could be to provide a thriving community for these young folks. Mm-hmm. So, you know, just by following the data, we were able to drill down and I'm able to tell you quite distinctly what are those factors. And then over 90% of all of the young people who are in Bon Air have some sort of a mental health need. Over 90%. So, you know, these are traumatized children that are coming from this community.
I'm hearing you say these are children, you know, as you drill down, you're talking about the people who should be allowed a different route other than a correctional or you know, a delinquency route or a, you know, juvenile justice. Right. These people should be getting their help. So they're missing that opportunity to help these children. Right. Then they're bypassing the whole idea that they are struggling socioeconomically, struggling or don't have resources to deal with mental health issues. And so now you're sitting here with the most vulnerable of the vulnerable in a place that is being oppressed. And now you add on to that the scare of this virus that has everybody else already scared. And then locking these children away. This is a terrible emergency. Do you find that are you going to be able to get these kids out?
Yeah.
Well, you know, we have, from the very beginning, back in March, we shared with the Department of Juvenile Justice, hey, you know what, these are our recommendations, which of course included working quickly to get as many young people out as possible. And we extended our hand to say, hey, can we help? Let us help you. And, you know, we got, you know, the perfunctory, thank you so much for reaching out. We are following our protocols. We're doing what we can. And yes, we will keep the community up to date on how things are going. And, you know, once they had that first positive case, and they just went kind of quiet. And I sent a FOIA request. And, you know, later that same week, you know, they said, hey, we'll get back to you by Tuesday of next week. And then they released themselves that they had 25 positive cases. And so it was like, you went quiet because the cases had gone up and you didn't want to share that. But you can't do that. You can't hide behind, we're an administration and we, you know, we've got to protect the privacy of these young people. At 25, you're no longer in fear. 1/8 of that facility has been infected. And then the numbers, it went up to 26 and now it's at 27. And they're talking about, oh, but the majority of these young folks, they never really exhibited the most
symptoms,
significant symptoms. But then there are 10 staff members that have been infected, 8 of whom are remaining out. You know, they've still not recovered. So we've got young people that are being impacted. We've got young people who are potentially now carriers and they are infecting the staff. The staff are going home to their families.
Right.
This is a public health crisis. It goes beyond this facility. We must be concerned for these children. We must be concerned for the folks caring for them. We must be concerned for the families and the community at large that these staff members are then going out and interacting with. And so, we have now offered the support of our community-based service coordination teams. We are hopeful that they will accept this assistance so that we really can begin to help expedite the release of some of these young people. We recognize that there are 3 different classifications of young people. They're the indeterminately sentenced. DJJ has unilateral control over whether or not they're released. We have determinately sentenced, which is going to take, and the blended sentence is going to take the involvement of the committing judge and the Commonwealth's attorney and that young person's attorney. But we are ready to work with all of those scenarios. It doesn't matter which one. We're here. We're ready. We're asking.
Let's go.
Let us help.
Well, now, right? Go get them. You have been sent for. Come here.
Yes.
Listen.
Yes.
How are the families of these young people responding to this situation? I know I read a couple articles where one mother at one point was receiving letters from her son. Then she didn't receive letters from her son. They're not telling the parents of these kids that they have contracted the virus. Like, what is the communication? Where's the myth? What is true? What is not true? And how are these families dealing with their sons in this situation?
Right. We're in contact with families, and the one thread that ties them all together is that they are all highly concerned for their young ones. They're at one point, young people were talking to their families fairly regularly, but now it's like they have 1 hour out and they're determining whether I want to do I get to talk to my family? Do I take a shower? Do I try to figure out some way to just move about so that I can, get large muscle movement going? So there was one mother who didn't hear from her son via phone for over a month. And when she finally did speak to him, of course, tears abounded, right? Because, you've not talked to your child in over a month. And then there is another mother who, she was talking to her son fairly regularly, but at least twice he was removed from the phone because he had to go and be tested. And, when she inquired, hey, why is my son being tested? Has he been in contact with someone who has the disease? And, they would not disclose whether he was in contact with someone who had contracted the disease, but they said our protocol, they quoted protocol to her. They said our policy and protocol is that when a young person has been in close proximity to someone who has tested positive, we then test them. And so without admitting that her son had been, they quoted the policy that indicated he had been, and at least twice. So, interestingly enough, it also highlights that there is a divide between, when there are Black youth and white youth in the facility, even what it looks like for them. I shared the youth who was talking to his mother frequently was a white youth. The mother who
frequently
hadn't talked to her son in a month. That was a Black youth.
Yeah. I have 2 questions. This is killing me. But what is most persuasive to the legislative body and the executive in terms of releasing these children? And 2, how can we, if even informally, become a part of that safety net network that you are a part of? Let me just say this, part of my reason for asking this is because years ago when I worked in the system, I remember that even that first intake, some of our children didn't have the ability to go home because they couldn't reach mom on the phone. Or they didn't have, but sometimes when you would have people come in and the parents would load up and they would walk into that courtroom with the pastor, aunt and uncle, somebody who could definitively say, look, Your Honor, I can do with them way more at home than you could ever do in 6 to 8 months. You know what I'm saying? So my question to you is, what is going to be persuasive? How can we help there? And how can we be a part of that network and that safety net?
Absolutely.
You know, I love what you just said, because that's what we do, right? We will pack a courtroom. Yes, indeed, we will. When there is a young person who is facing charges, we need that judge to know, you know what, this is not a young person standing alone, and they are more than the sum of their worst moments. And we are here to let you know just how we will support this young person. We have folks coming in and, you know, we have run programming ourselves. You know, oftentimes courts will say, we need this young person to do this training, this training, this training. We put the trainings together so that they are getting it from folks that look like them. They are getting it from folks that can make it culturally relevant for them, and from folks that they respect and understand, you've been through what I have been through. You understand me. You know, one young man, you know, who has experienced homelessness, I remember sharing with him, you know what, I've been there. I know what that's like. Let me help you. And then as we got this young man stabilized, and, you know, and now he's a young man who will advocate at the drop of a hat. He will speak up. He will speak out. He has testified in city council. He has testified at school board. He's an advocate in the lobbyist arena when we're in legislature. And, you know, so that's what it takes, right? It takes being whatever it is that you have to bear. You bring your organization. If you do mental health, add yourself to our list. If you do, if you know of a group home, if you've got a group home, add yourself to the list as a potential place for a young person to stay. Whatever. If you can pray, pray for these babies. If we have a court date and we send out a call for folks to come, be there in that courtroom to pack it out and let the judge know that this is a supported young person. Bring whatever it is to the community. And if you can, when we have advocacy days and we're going to visit with legislators, show up. Whenever you watch the legislature, oftentimes you will see it is disability rights, gun rights, and education rights. They pack the state house. They pack it out. We need that for our children. Where are the people that are willing to stand up and say, you know what, these babies matter. You will not continue to just build large spaces out in rural white America to prop up their economies on the backs of our Black and brown kids. You shall not. You know, and so we need folks to show up however you can. And if you can't do anything else, give $1, give $2. You know, go to riseforyouth.org and click the link and support our work. Right now, we are putting together immune booster kits because, you know, even the free food that they're giving out to these communities right now, it's full of sugar. It's full of all kinds of things that are all counterproductive to building healthy immune systems. And so we're putting together packages that have fresh fruit and then citrus fruit at that. It's got garlic in it. It's got avocado in it. It's got nuts and seeds in it. All of the things that folks need to be using, onions, you know, we are putting together the things that are going to help build an immune system that is going to be able to fight, that is going to, provide snacks that are healthy. You know, kids will eat an orange, cut it in 4s, peel it for them, you know, do what's right by these children. And so, that's something that's an initiative that we're also doing right now. We're creating what we're calling Healthy Community Immune Booster Kits. And we are putting these together so that we can begin to distribute them. You know, for anyone who is, you know, accepting free food, look, we want to show up where you're giving out community food for, you know, the school district. Thank you for your sugar frosted flakes. Can we add some oranges to that, please?
Listen, that's so great. Really quick, we are at the end. Do you feel like this is a fight that churches, faith communities can get into? I know that there are so many in the comments right now who are sharing, hey, you know, my heart is heavy. I am just feeling so drawn to this work, and I want to do more than just pray. If I'm a church person, or if I'm a pastor, or if I have some kind of faith-based organization, how can I get involved in this? What can I do tangibly,
a couple of things,
other than a prayer meeting?
Right. A couple of things. So first of all, please go to our website, and on our resource page, you will see that there is a place to fill out that you are a provider. Fill that form out if you have got services that you can add to our list. When you fill out that form, it goes immediately into our database, and it will separate you out into whatever form of service that you provide. Again, giving always helps. If you would prefer to buy some fruits, we're getting lemons, oranges, tangerines, garlic, avocados, onions, sunflower seeds, and almonds. That's off the top of my head, the components of that kit that we are purchasing. If you want to purchase those things, and our address is 1705 East Main Street, Richmond, please send an email to info@riseforyouth.org, and one of our team will meet you there to receive those supplies. And you will know, we will take pictures and show you the distribution of these supplies. Wow. these food products that are going to boost immune in community. Mm-hmm. You can also, when we are doing our advocacy, sign up. Please receive our alerts. When we are at the General Assembly, when we are sending emails and such to the governor, we need folks who are just going to bombard the State House with these letters. We bombard heaven. Let's bombard the governor's office. Let's bombard the Secretary of Public Health and Safety. Let's bombard the Director of the Department of Juvenile Justice with our demands that you take these tangible steps to release as many kids as possible. Mm-hmm. You can also, once you sign up, every action that we ever take, you'll hear about it. And so those are, and then of course, that May 5th, it's being considered the Giving Tuesday now. And it usually happens the Tuesday after Black Friday, but it's going to be Tuesday, May 5th, in light of the pandemic. And and we're saying, you know what, if you don't give to our organization, give to an organization that's helping children. Because I'm going to tell you what, when we wrap around the children of our nation, we are doing a thing, right? Children, they are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is our reward, right? Is that what the word says?
Absolutely.
Let's wrap around. And didn't he tell us that we need to be like little children? He said that, unless you become like a child. Mm-hmm. And then he said, it's better that a millstone be tied around your neck and that you be cast into the sea than you mess with one of his babies.
Absolutely.
So there are so many ways to support, so many ways. So I encourage you. Go to our website, sign up to be one of the providers. If you know of a family in need, you can even make a referral, because that form is also on there. Sign up to receive our alerts so that you know whatever action we're taking. There is a letter that we send out with some very concrete actions, that you even share on social media. Whatever you share, hashtag Justice for Youth is the antidote. Justice for Youth is the antidote. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's always give.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much, Valerie. You all heard her. You have a million ways to partner with her and Rise for Youth. And more importantly, a million ways to impact the life of a child who happens to be in a detention center or incarcerated. So make sure that you go to their website. Our tech guy put the website up for you. He walked you through the whole thing. I saw it. So make sure that you go to their website. Make sure that you're following them. Make sure you sign up, that you get their newsletter. Make sure that you are always aware not only of what they're doing, but how you can partner with them to help them do it. As usual, this has been another episode of What's the Message. Make sure you're following us on social media, on Facebook at Message Magazine, and on Instagram and Twitter at Message1898. You can go to our website at www.messagemagazine.com. You can sign up for our bi-monthly magazine or for our weekly newsletter. But really focus on getting connected to Rise for Youth. We want to partner with them. Exactly. We want to partner with them. We want you to partner with them. And also, just because they're in Richmond, Virginia, doesn't mean that you, and you live in another state, doesn't mean that you can't participate. And I'm sure there are also juvenile centers and correctional facilities in your state, in your county, in your community, that you can take this information and you can apply it to your context as well. So just use this episode as a moment to just be like, man, if there are kids over here who are in solitary confinement as a means of quarantine, then maybe there's another baby in my county that's in solitary confinement because of quarantine as well. So just let's just bombard, like she said, I love the way she said that. Let us bombard these court houses, let us bombard our governors, let us bombard our legislators, and let us continue to bombard heaven so that we can get our young people out of these situations. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. We will see you next Thursday. Bye.